Hi everybody, this is Osprey from mychartcoach.com, and in this video we're going to take a look at the cannabis sector. Okay, yeah, there was the a pullback today, so they did end up selling the news before the news comes tomorrow. So we're going to look at some of the top stocks in the sector. This will give you an idea of what's happening. Okay, first up is Aurora Cannabis, ticker symbol ACBFF. As you can see here, a red candle formed today. It failed to stay above 70 on RSI. It pulled back. It's below 80 on Fasto. It needs to stay above 70 on both indicators. On Plus DI here, you don't want to see it crossing over that black line to the downside. Today, a red candle formed, and that did form a bearish engulfing reversal pattern. Okay, so that is a strong reversal pattern, and so we'll have to keep an eye out for this pattern confirming. Okay, and if you look here, there's a gap between high of day on Friday and low of day yesterday, and as you can see, the lower wick didn't quite hit that green line in the bottom of the gap, so that gap is still unfilled, and so look for a potential bounce once that gap fills. If it dropped down to EMA 8 at 1046, that line that would fill the gap. If that level broke, the downside risk would be coming down here, testing this ascending support line and possibly the middle Bollinger Band at 979. As long as this dotted purple line holds, the uptrend is intact. It's once there's a close below and that level turned into resistance, that's where there would be downside risk. Right now, this is a very strong uptrend. It just got ahead of itself with this candle closing above the upper Bollinger Band. The candles are working back into the bands. As long as support holds, the uptrend can continue. Notice there was a big volume spike today, and that is always a red flag on a red day. It was the largest volume since the start of the run. If we look here at the ACBFF, the Aurora Cannabis 15-minute chart, you can see the gap between high of day on the 12th and low of day on the 13th. And so you can see it came down here. It's between this candle and this candle, and it came right down to this green line and almost filled the gap, but it didn't hit the gap fill, which is right about 1051. Once it hits that 1051 level, that gap will be filled. Right now, it's trying to hold this 100 simple moving average at 1066 support zone. If it were to come down here and break below the bottom of that gap, it could possibly bounce off of this 200 simple moving average at 1035. So look for a bounce in this zone between 1035 and 1050. Okay, if that failed to break, then you have the 300 simple moving average at 10. That level should hold. You should get a technical bounce. I mean, Aurora Cannabis is heading to the New York Stock Exchange in a couple of weeks, and so yeah, it would be surprising to see a downtrend start. Now something to keep an eye on here is at the start of the day there was this black candle that formed. Check out the candle up here. Okay, and this is where this is the open at 12:30, and it started trading below the open. That was a signal, and it was above the upper Bollinger Band, which is the black, the purple line. That was a signal to lock in gains. If you were already in this, that was a signal they were locking them in. They were pulling it down, and the bears were attacking. And if you look down here at the volume bars, there's a huge volume spike. That's what we call a climax spike. And so you had a big run up. It was an uptrend, and then you had the gap up open above the upper Bollinger Band with the black candle forming with the giant volume spike. That was all signals to lock in gains, and then as you can see, it pulled back lower. All the charts in this video formed the exact same pattern, and so that's why we follow the patterns, because they repeat over and over again. So if you know to lock in gains when that setup happens, next time you'll be able to profit. Okay, if you look at CRON here, it's in the 50 to 70 bull zone. It's still bullish. I mean, these stocks are still bullish. They're in uptrends. As long as that 50 holds, the bulls are still strong. Check out how Fasto's pinched here. You don't really want to see that black line crossing over the red line. That would be a signal the chart's breaking down. The last time that happened, well, I guess it happened over here as well, but you know, it could signal a pullback, right? You could see how the chart was, the stock was pulling back when you had the black line below the red line. It needs to stay above to signal the bulls are still in control. Now Today there was a pullback. You can see a red candle formed, but a bearish reversal pattern did not form. Cronus Group held up better than the other stocks. I think one reason is the MedMen connection. They're partners with MedMen, who are the largest dispensary owner in the United States, and so they're the best positioned company out of the Canadian companies to take advantage of the U.S. market when it becomes federally legal. There was talk out about the Trump administration at least legalizing medical marijuana on a federal level sometime next year, and so that's that puts MedMen in the driver's seat to be the #1 dispensary in that market. They already are, and so you have Cronus Group here. I think maybe that's one reason why they're holding up better, why it held up better. And so right now the big level, there's two of them. It's over here, and I talked about it. This is a previous chart that we've been working on, and it was this 12 level is huge. It's all about staying above 12, and then this closing price on the 29th was a big level to break. You could see it temporarily opened above both levels at 13, but it dropped below. It's all about this 12, and I'm calling it 1275. Those are two big levels. If we can get above both of them, then you have this high close here on the 20th, which is right around 1375. Those are the big levels on the chart to break above and turn into support. Dropping back below, it's putting it back in pretty much the sideways channel. Most of the tradings between this green line and this red line, it breaks out above, below a little bit, but most of it's in between. Right now, it's sucked back into the sideways channel. A lot of these cannabis sector stocks have been going sideways for the last couple weeks, last several weeks, and so they're getting sucked back into the channel. They could start going sideways again. That's one pattern that could happen. What needs to really happen for the bulls is holding this middle Bollinger Band at 1095. If it can stay above that level, then the uptrend's intact, and then you want to see it push above 12. Trading above 12 is going to be a good sign that it wants to push higher. Failing to break that 12 level and then dropping below the middle Bollinger Band and 11, what that would do is put this 50-day simple moving average down here on deck. Now, there is a red flag on the chart, and a lot of these cannabis sector stocks do have the same red flag, and so keep that in mind. There are gaps on the chart between Friday of last week and Monday of this week, and the setup, it's set up there to come back and fill the gap. They won't necessarily fill the gap right away. Most of the time gaps for penny stocks do get filled. I know this is at $9, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. But keep that in mind. If it drops below the middle Bollinger Band, I would shoot for a gap fill. If it came down there and hit that 50-day simple moving average and hit 990 again and filled the gap, that would be a great place for a technical bounce. Okay, so this look down here at MACD. You can see there's already a crossover in 8, 13, and 5, and then check out how it's pinched on the 12, 26, and 9. If that crosses over, it could signal the start of a new uptrend. There was a false signal back here when it went up, and so that's not what you want to see if you're a bull. You want to see the next push higher. That remains to be seen if that can happen with the cannabis sector right now, but tomorrow is the big day for Canadian legalization. If you look here on the 15-minute chart, it filled the jar back to the level from October 1st. It came all the way down on the 10th, made a bottom in the 8s, and then it worked its way all the way back up to that 12 resistance zone from the 1st. The jar was filled. It broke out above it, and then check out the big black candle. That was your sign. When you have a very strong uptrend and a gap above, many times the best thing to do is lock in gains when it pulls back. Now, if it pulls back similar to how it did here, you had a similar setup here, but what happened here? The pink line held. It pulled back, the pink line held. The pink line was the reload zone, that's EMA 4. As long as it was holding, the chart was still super strong. What was the difference here? It pulled back and EMA 4 broke. It dropped below the pink line. So if you exited here and it pulled back to EMA 4, you could reload off that level, keep riding higher. If you exited here and EMA 4 broke, you were glad that you headed to the sidelines. And so that's just a strategy to throw out at you. Above the upper Bollinger Band like that, with the giant climax spike, they were all signals that they were locking in gains early. So keep that in mind. Now heading forward, what needs to happen is this 50 simple moving average at 1135 needs to hold. So keep an eye on that level tomorrow. If it were to drop below the 50 simple moving average, the downside risk is it would come down here and test that 100, 300, and 200 simple moving averages, possibly drop down to that 1050 level. Okay, let's look at canopy growth here. So it did close down 7%. Notice how it's been in this sideways channel. You have RSI still in the bull zone. It's been between 50 and 70 for several weeks. Thasto couldn't stay above 80 for very long. It was up there for a day and then it dropped back below. You did have that bearish crossover. The big thing is stay above 50. If it were to drop below 50, that would signal the chart's getting weak. It's breaking down. It's heading back. The problem is it's potentially getting sucked back into this channel. You can see it has that very strong sideways channel as well, and it's been trying to break out above it. Yesterday, that close above was signaling that it wants to head higher, but today's pullback is testing that bull scenario. Is it going to break out? Right now, it's above the key level. The closing price here on the 25th, you can see it's just above that. It needs to stay above. If it were to close below that level, it could get sucked back into this sideways channel and start getting that sideways action again, or it could head lower. The downside risk is if it dropped below EMA 4 at 52.38, it would come down here and fill the gap. There's a gap between Friday and Monday, and so a drop down there to $50, tested that middle Bollinger Band, would fill the gap. And so that's the downside risk, is a $50 support test. Once again, all these stocks had the big volume spike. They're trying to get the bullish crossovers going on MACD. MACD is signaling that they want to get a new uptrend, but the bears are strong. And you had, Jim Cramer before the bell saying he would short canopy growth right before the open, which did not help. Bearish dark cloud cover reversal pattern did form. This is a strong pattern as well. When you get the gap up open above the previous close, that is a warning. A bearish reversal pattern could form, and then it closed past the midpoint of yesterday's candle. That formed the bearish dark cloud cover. Okay, so now on the 15-minute chart, you could see over here the gap between high of day on the 12th and low of day on the 15th, and so a drop down here to the 200 simple moving average at 49.93, that would fill the gap. Okay, so if it came down there, test that 50 support zone, that could be a gap fill, a bounce. You have the 300 simple moving average right down here at 49.30, and so this would be a big support level to hold and bounce off of if it were tested. To head higher, it has to get above that 50 simple moving average at 54.18. Trading above 54, pushing above that level, that would be bullish. It would be very bullish if you saw it trading back above 55. It's all about the 57 high close resistance zone. That's the big level to break. Is this going to be the temporary top for canopy growth, or is it going to be able to break above 57 and make new highs? Well, instead of the black candle, this had the big red candle, but it was a stronger pullback than the other stocks. It actually went red. It closed, it pulled back below the previous the close from yesterday, and so that was the red flag. When you had that with the big volume spike, and also you have to look across the sector. What are all the other stocks in the sector doing? And when you see they're all pulling back across the board, that's a signal. Okay, maybe if you're a trader, it's different. If you're a long-term investor, you need to adjust your strategy accordingly. But if you're a trader, that gives you a chance to trade, lock in gates, possibly reload lower. People whoever jumped on puts right at the open, and they can they ended up doing well. And so yeah, let's look at TLRY here. So TLRY is pulled back as well. It's not, it's not totally broken down. It still has a strong uptrend. It's above EMA 4. You have RSI between 50 and 70. You did have a crossover on Fasto. It couldn't stay above 80. It needs to get back above 80, stay above 50. It's still holding EMA 4 support at 153.69. If it dropped below that level, there's a small gap here between Friday and Monday, and the gap's right around 148, and so that's the downside risk, is a $10 drop down to 148 to fill that gap. It needs to hold the middle Bollinger Band currently at 143.64. If it were to drop below that level, it could come down here and test this descending resistance line, possibly come down to 120. You just don't want to see the middle Bollinger Band break. Now that it's above it, it needs to hold it to keep the uptrend going. We have resistance level 1 here. It was trying to break that yesterday. It closed right at that level. It needs to break above that. That's the October a high close. You know, it made a higher close yesterday just fractionally. It needs to get back above that level, and then you have it back here in September on the 19th and 18th, the next two big levels to break above that. And so, yeah, once again, you know, it's trying to cross over here on the 8, 13, and 5. It didn't have quite as big the volume spike as the other stocks, as you can see. And that's interesting. And then it did form the bearish dark cloud cover as well. And so that's the same pattern there as CGC. And then, yeah, if you look here at TLRY on the 15-minute chart, this will be the last chart in this video, you can see it filled the jar as well. They all have very similar patterns. That's why we follow the patterns. The ticker symbol will change, but the patterns don't. And so, you know, the black candle with the gap up open, the big volume spike, that signaled the safest thing to do is to lock in gains. It pulled back. It gave everybody a chance to reload lower if they so choose. If it fails to get above the 50 simple moving average and turn 160 into support, I think the safest thing to do would wait for this gap to fill, a drop down here to that 148 zone. This is the bottom of the gap. That would fill a gap. You know, if it came down there and bounced off that 300 simple moving average at 145, that would be, you know, interesting. You know, once they get down there and they start testing the lower moving averages, many times they'll test the bottom moving average, similar to back over here on October 3rd, where you had the pullback, and then the bottom moving average was the 200, and it came right down to that, and that's where it bounced. And so, you know, you're looking for that type of move here if it started heading to the downside. Okay, so we'll just see if the gaps fill, or you know, if people buy cannabis stocks in, you know, just as a symbolic gesture tomorrow. You never know how it's going to work out with the retail investors, if people are going to start buying the cannabis stocks, or if you know, they'll continue selling the news. But it's going to be interesting. I'll be posting charts and technical analysis in the premium chat. Please come check it out. All right, thank you.